and the manuscripts. Oh, there we go. There we go. Hi, YouTube. Just a little late to the party, having some technical problems. I had to restart, so hope, yeah, hope not too many people got bumped out. Um, I'm here a little bit later than I intended to tonight, but not too bad considering that I actually ended up having to rewrite this chapter because there was like a bunch of different versions of the chapter, and it was different enough that I needed to kind of amalgamate. And I was trying to do it last night, but I'm still recovering from surgery, so it's just takes me a lot longer than I would like. Um, as a result, I did not finish working on the chapter, so I had to do that tonight before the stream. Now, this might be a way of things until like I see like there's not a big difference in the chapters. Um, there was like some like massive changes in this chapter, so I'm gonna read it and hopefully it'll make sense because I like kind of spliced them together. So this is my first time. Well, it is kind of thing because even though I read the chapter and I technically know what happens in the chapter, um, I still I still need to read it for editing anyway because I'm not really sure of like how it's going to sound when I read it all as one chapter because it was literally like cutting bits from this piece and bits from that piece and they sounded kind of good together but not having read the whole entire thing. So now I'm going to read the whole entire thing and hopefully it makes sense. And if I have to pull from another piece from another one of these, then that'll be its own thing. So thank you all for tuning in. The name of the story is Troll Hunters. If you are tuning in tonight and it's your first time, we are over halfway through, so I highly recommend going back to the beginning and listening and or watching the other streams in order to get caught up on the story before you launch into tonight's episode. Without further ado, as I've already taken quite a bit of your time, for at least for those who are on Twitch, without further ado, I present Chapter 13. Gatrus Fee looked at his band of ruffians. We're going to have to move fast. Someone up there was casting divinations and got a hint of why I want the girl. You're going to go in there fast and grab her and get away. Now, I've cast a spell that'll make you invisible to them and also prevent them from hearing sounds of your approach. No, don't stare at each other with those stupid expressions. Of course the spell doesn't affect you. You'll have enough to do without bumbling into one another. One thing about the spell, it disappears as soon as you touch one of those others. So we don't want to fight. And you're not going to be able to kill anyone or stop to loot them. What I want is for two of you to go in and knock her unconscious with one of the sacks of sand, but keep her on her horse. As you get her away, I'll recast the spell on the three of you, and we should be able to get away without trouble. I have another spell to confuse them in the pursuit. He looked them over grimly. And if any of you does anything to foul up this plan, I'll see to it that he suffers. Are there any questions? Good. Let's go. Or now go. There was no warning, though Carnutron was reaching up to scratch the back of his neck when two ruffians appeared on each side of Derisua, one clasping her bridle, the other swinging something against the side of her head. She slumped forward, and suddenly all three of them disappeared. Varian made a gesture. Nothing happened. He made another gesture, speaking some words. Hoofbeats sounded, moving off ahead of them. Varian spoke some more words, gesturing in choppy strokes. Artran felt a heat and heaviness around him, and his hair stood on end. Carnutran cursed and sent his horse up the hill in pursuit. "Wait!" called Varian. "Something's wrong here." But the older warrior wasn't listening, nor were Pothor, Kellis nor Beckel. Varian turned to Artran. "The spell against ensorcelment. Cast it on Kellis and Beckel. I'll try to catch the other two." Casting out of his mind all self-recriminations, Artran concentrated on his wand and cast the spell. He felt it work in his mind, like a pattern of notched sticks sliding into place, and he knew that he had succeeded. Ah, he knew he had succeeded. Go after them, boy. They'll be confused for a few minutes, and we'll have to bring them back here so we can get them on the right trail. They're worse than confused. They didn't even recognize him for a few scary moments. "Beckel, no! It's me, Artran. Stop it, Beckel. We've got to get back on the right trail." All the while he was trying to reason with Beckel, he's keeping an eye on the archer who is clumsily trying to nock an arrow. Then Beckel was lowering his sword and staring at Artran as though he hardly recognized the young man. "Artran? Artran, what's happening here, boy? I feel as though I've been sleeping and dreaming ugly dreams. Where are the others?" Some people took Derishua and used spells to cover their escape. One of the spells was specifically to lead you off in the wrong directions. Varian sent me out to bring you back so we can start tracking them. It took a while still after that of talking, of repeating the same things 2 or 3 times before the two were far enough recovered to follow Artran back to where they had started. Varian was already there, along with Pothor and Carnutran. Carnutran was looking bleak, the expression promising ill for whoever was responsible for this attack. Artran, knowing full well his part in it all, hoped that the old warrior would not decide to take him to task for it. But Varian was in charge. "First of all, I need all of the knowledge we can get regarding who did this and why. Artran, what did you see in your scrying bowl? I know it scared you, and it suggests that that may be very important." Artran managed this by treating it, as much as he was able, as another of his master's oral examinations on something he was supposed to have observed. "I saw Derishua coming out of a tent, dressed in a green gown, and waiting to, and wait, and walking toward a stone altar. There was an impression of a sacrificer's knife waiting. In the background, the walls of Finich were the walls of Finich, and an army camped around it." Hmm. Morning or evening? Morning. Any notion of at the time of year? Artran cast his mind over the brief glimpse he had seen of the circumstances, seeking any hints of it. It was about this time of year. And the army? Should we assume it was Gizraji? There? Yes. King Fehimor's banner was there. Hmm. The wizard thought for a time, then said, "I better scry for her and see what comes up." He muttered as he dug out his bowl. Then he filled the bowl and cast a spell. Nothing happened. He tried again, and again nothing happened. "He's blocking me. Maybe I could try to break through it with power, but I have a better idea. Artran, come here and try. Use medium power." He shifted away to let Artran sit down. Artran cast a spell, working for medium power as his master had ordered. The picture leaped into focus. Derishua was riding with her hands bound in front of her, and her legs bound beneath the horse's belly. Around her and in front of her were a small band of rough-looking men, and at their head was one in the garb of a magician. Varian nodded. "As I suspected, he was not able to hide her from the bond between the two of you. But what does he want with her? Try for the future, boy." Artran sought out the future, particularly the future as it involved Dirishua and the unknown magician. All he got was a brief flickering of Dirishua in a green gown being led toward an altar before the walls of a city around which an army was encamped. The picture went out. Artran looked up at Varian. What does that mean? Varian addressed the party. So then, I am doing a fair degree of guesswork here, but everyone knows it since the time a few years ago when the king of all things from Tenara came down and his magicians blast down the walls of Finnish. He has made sure that various magicians have strengthened and supported those walls and to make them impregnable. But the business of Derishua walking toward the altar reminds me of some things. You're most certainly right in your inference, boy, that involves blood magic. When magicians get together, someone always knows of someone else who has heard of a spell of a dreadful power requiring human sacrifice. And the sacrifice is not just anyone, but a specially chosen victim. The criteria for the choice is rather vague. Obviously, someone has uncovered such a spell, and the criteria for the sacrifice require a person such as Jerusalem, which is why the magician was seeking her so single-mindedly. Jerusalem is intended to be sacrificed before some city. From the look of it, I'd say that it was part of a spell to break down the walls. Can't we do anything about it? Perhaps and perhaps not. The difficulty with predictions such as this is that they show one of several possible futures. Very rarely an absolute prediction. Sometimes knowing the future develops a fatalism where all efforts are subtly aimed towards that outcome. There is a difficulty here, in that we will possibly be facing a whole army. Are we willing to do that? I am, said Artran, and was surprised to find out that he was, and indeed was so willing that he would go off on his own as others refused. She's been my comrade for too long for me to leave it be, Carnutran said. Pothar grinned. We are fighting the Holy Band on behalf of our young friend here. Why should we fear some king's army, magicians and all? I'll come too, said Becco sourly. But it's not the kind of thing I usually do. I'm not going to stay here all alone, put in Callisto with a shrug. There was a pause. Then Varian seemed to realize they were all watching him. Oh, of course, I'll come too. Someone's got to keep you out of trouble. Jerusha didn't bother screaming, or even struggling against her bonds. A pull or two had demonstrated she was tied very securely, and it seemed to her to wait for an opportunity. Sorry, it seemed better to her to wait for an opportunity. In the meantime, she would just act totally cowed. Okay. I'd see if someone got careless. The fellow in the magician's robes, who seemed to be in charge, had not bothered to tell her why they had kidnapped her. But then, as Carnutran had said on occasion, we'll probably find out soon enough what kind of trouble we're in, and we won't like it. For all that, she couldn't help speculating. The magician was not the kind of man who was usually for hire, at least not for hire to people like her father. So, what did he need her for? The likelihood was that it was nothing good. Otherwise, he would have tried to convince her to volunteer. And that meant she ought to be seriously considering escape. Which brought her back to the fact that all she could do was seem as helpless as possible and hoping for her captors to get complacent. There was no use hoping for her companions to come racing up behind to rescue her, since this group would certainly have killed a lot of them while they slept. Mm. I realize where I had a little mistake there. Sorry. Wow. Did I just do that? Yes, I just did that. It's later and it's been a long day and I'm recovering still. Catras Fee was not in a particularly good mood. He had the woman, but his sources told him that the King Behemorthor and his army were already nearing Vinich, which meant the king, God rots God's rot his entrails, had started marching shortly after he had set out to find the woman, which in turn meant that one of his rivals had convinced the king to use his method of knocking down the walls in preference to the spell that Gatras Fee had been working on this whole time. Sorry, I'm having like a moment here. It, sorry, I just destroyed a pen tonight. It's definitely that kind of night. Okay, and that meant he was good. Sorry. Which in turn meant one of his rivals had convinced the king to use his method of knocking down the walls in preference to the spell Gatter's Fee had been working on this whole time. And that meant he was going to have to rush to get to finish in time to protect his interests. And he was going to have to keep close watch on this band of ruffians of his. He would not be able to trust any of them alone with the woman, that was for sure. So as long as he was present, they would do nothing. But if he were not, that was another matter. It might be a good idea just to make an example of someone It might be a good idea to make an example of someone just to keep the rest in line. And in addition, there was a touch he had felt just a little while ago. Someone was scrying for them and had found them. He had dealt with that by a quick spell, but this original spell ought to have kept anyone from finding them. Was the old fellow with the band of troll hunters that good then? That didn't seem likely. But then hadn't seemed likely that anyone would be able to get through his barrier either. He was not going to admit to his band of cut that to his band of cutthroats either, since they had warned him to kill the others and he refused, knowing that they had been right and he'd been wrong all along, which just make them more intractable. Yes, he was definitely going to have to make an example of someone. They're going like they haven't got a care in the world. Didn't they expect to be followed? I think perhaps not, Callisto. I think their leader does not have a great understanding of human relationships. He hides himself and his band magically, very well, but has no thought of hiding them physically. How soon will we catch them, broken Artran? She glanced over at him. A lot depends on how fast they keep going and how fast we keep going. They haven't been moving very fast up to now, but at this point, they'd still be riding in the dark. When we get to the point where we're riding in daylight, we'll be able to tell better. And it also depends on whether they have some other reason to hurry other than the possibility of pursuit. If they do start hurrying, it may take a little while longer for us to overtake them. King Vehemar was pleased, pleased almost to the point of being smug. Two versions of the giant Sashto had been tested, each larger than the last, with good results. The largest one was now being hauled along in one of the supply wagons, covered with canvas and casual against casual viewers and even spies. When they camped at night, the thing was surrounded by guards with very careful orders to spear anyone, whatever his rank, who tried to get a look at it without being able to give a correct password, which password was assigned every evening by the king himself. They had not been able to test the latest one, since the noise had always attracted attention, and it was very difficult to arrange the appropriate privacy on the march. But with the success of the previous two, it seemed likely that this one would work as well. Let Finnish look to its walls now. The trail ends here, Callistos was clearly frustrated. I've cast about in every direction, but there seems to be no sign of them from here on. Well, they have a magician with them, and a fairly competent one. Likely he cast a spell to hide their traces. Well, what is magically hidden can be magically uncovered. Let's see now. It was possible, but not easy. their quarry, was a very competent magician, and his spells were not easy to unravel. Varian had to enlist Artran's aid to weave a few minor supporting spells, which he then took and added to his own larger one. There was a sudden flash, then a glow spread out along the trail before them. I see it now, Callisto called. You needn't have bothered with the glow. The magician shrugged. The glow will fade in a few minutes. It was only part of unraveling the spell. The greatest problem we face is that sometime within the next few hours, depending on how vigilant the fellow is, he will notice that his spell has been unraveled and may try something else. He paused a moment. No, let me correct myself. He will certainly try something else. I shall have to be wary for magical traps from here on. You'll have to be wary? I'm the lady who's riding at the head of the group, so if there's any traps, won't I be the one to set them off? I can expect to be turned into a toad at any time in the next little while, then? I was not knowing that you, a lady, were, chuckled Pothar. Ha! If I weren't a lady, I'd put an arrow through your empty head long ago. Children, children, admonished Varian with a smile. Such unseemly bickering. No, sweet lady, you need not worry too much about being turned into a toad as you ride. I'll be seeking for traps as we go. Now, if you don't get too far ahead in front of us, I'll be able to keep you relatively safe. In the meantime, Artran was restraining his impatience by maintaining by sheer willpower. I think that's what they mean. I'm not sure. He was just barely able to keep himself from giving a sigh of relief as they began moving once more. Dirigible watched as the magician worked his spell. She kept her face from showing anything, though inside she was thinking that hasn't this increased here. Wait, oh my goodness. Hold on, typo. She kept her face from showing anything, though inside she was thinking that this increased her chances a little more. Not much more, she reflected, since it only took one man out of the band, but any hope was better than none. The man's supposed crime had been some sort of insolence towards Gatra's fee, though Derish was sure had never had never noticed it. The first inkling the first inkling she, and likely any of the others, had of this insolence was when the magician had cast a spell on him to hold him in place while he accused and convicted him of the crime, giving no specifics. Apparently, his accusation was evidence enough. As a punishment for his crime, he was condemned to ride back along their trail and kill anyone who was following them. Lest he should think to avoid the punishment, the spells were being wove around him to prevent him from doing anything else. Right, even to keep him fighting after he was mortally wounded. The leader of the ruffians voiced a small protest. One man, Lord? What good will one man do against a band? The magician turned a calm gaze on him. More than you think. Or perhaps you are becoming insolent as well? The man backed down. No, no, Lord, not at all. Good. Obey my orders as given, then. Yes, Lord. One of the things that had bothered Jerijua was that she had obviously been kidnapped for the magician's reasons. He had paid little or no attention to her, seeming to regard her much the way he might regard a pound of some special herb. He'd not even introduced himself to her. The only reason she knew his name was by hearing his hired men speak of him. And that impersonal treatment was even more menacing than any amount of gloating. The spellbound man mounted his horse a little clumsily, then rode down the trail. Someone's coming this way, said Callisto, and they're coming as though they don't care who hears them. Varian shrugged. We're not necessarily the only ones using these trails, but we'd best be careful anyway. Shortly after that, a man came riding toward them. He held a drawn sword around his saddle bow, and his face was blank. You seek the red-haired woman? You seek the red-haired woman. There was little inflection in his voice, just enough for them to tell it was a question. Yes, answered Varian. Without another word, the man raised his sword and kicked his horse into a charge. Dun dun dun! Okay, so that was chapter 13, as I have finagled it. So tonight and tomorrow night, I believe both chapter 14 and 15 have 3 options to them. So I'll be reading them over and seeing, hopefully they don't have a lot to get done. And yeah, I'll work on that tonight and hopefully they'll be ready for tomorrow. Otherwise, look for me again between 5:30 and 7:30, I guess. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was just a little longer because I was actually rewriting it. So bear with me. My time for starting might be a little bit later because of this, and that's going to be going on till the end of this week. Well, probably to the end of the show, till the end of this story, anyway. Yeah. So chapter 15. So then, yeah, I guess we got after this week we have just we'll be wrapping it up at the end of next week. So anyway, I will talk to you all again tomorrow night. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing. I'll talk to you all again tomorrow. Again, like I said, between 5:30 and 7:30 Pacific time. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.